Today is Tuesday, December 3rd, 2024. This is Quick Start from CBN News. I'm Dan Andros. An American-Israeli hostage is confirmed dead. We'll have that top story and more on today's podcast, where we bring you news from a Christian perspective. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a rating. You can email us as well, quickstartpodcast@cbn.org. We're glad you're here with us, getting through the news of the cray each and every weekday, bright and early. And joining me today to get through it all, CBN's Billy Hallow and Trey Goins-Phillips. Gentlemen, a lot to get to on the focus story. Bit of a positive outcome anyway. A pastor trained in MMA ends up becoming a hero.
Yeah, his story is just is crazy. Like you would not think that a pastor would take down a would-be assailant the way that he did. So we'll get into the details of that.
All right, looking forward to the details there coming up on the focus story. On the main thing, is AI ethical? We talked to the leader of a U.S. digital strategies at Crew, and Billy has that conversation and discussion on today's main thing. All right, make sure you're subscribed to all of our CBN News podcasts, DC Debrief with John Stolness and Newsmakers with Billy. You can get those links in the description of this podcast episode. And with that, we are going to head over to the news in 90 seconds. An American-Israeli hostage has been confirmed dead. Omar Maxim Nutra, a 21-year-old Israeli-American citizen, served as a tank platoon commander in the IDF. He was killed during the Hamas-led attack on October 7th, back in 2023, near one of the kibbutzes that was hardest hit during the assault. And despite the fact that he's been confirmed dead, his body still remains held hostage in Gaza. Israel's foreign minister described his actions as falling, quote, in a heroic battle. The kibbutz there suffered devastating losses, with 1 in 4 residents being murdered or kidnapped during the attack. Loved ones recalled his optimism and ability to brighten any room he entered, honoring his legacy amidst profound loss. And within the past few days, Islamist rebel forces launched a major offensive against the Syrian regime of President Bashar al-Assad. They now control Aleppo, Syria's second largest city. Analyst Jonathan Spire, a Syria expert from the Middle East Forum, told CBN News this is unprecedented for the rebellion. The rebellion never held all of Aleppo, and it was expelled from all of Aleppo because it held the eastern part of the city for a while in 2016. Those are just some of today's top headlines. You can read more over at cbnnews.com. Obviously, guys, tragic news on this Israeli hostage here. And, you know, Trump just released something yesterday, a very strong statement. CBN's Chris Mitchell talked about it a little bit yesterday in a live stream on the CBN News YouTube channel, and basically calling on the carpet the Biden administration for not being strong enough in trying to get these hostages back. And it's, you know, been well over a year now that they're either unaccounted for, or we've seen, you know, videos of them emaciated and doing not well here, obviously being held in Gazan tunnels and wherever else they're being shuffled around to. But Trump is saying, hey, listen, like, this is unacceptable that this was allowed to go on this long.
You know, there's this idea of peace through strength, right? This idea that you need to be strong and that negotiating is not always going to work, that you need to hit harder in order to have a result that you want. And I think, you know, that seems to be much more of where Trump is on these sorts of issues. And he has consistently, say what you want to say about Trump, but been very passionate about people who are being held captive, whether it's Christian pastors being held in the Middle East, whether it is the hostages. We have often, even before he was president the first time, heard him speak on these things. In fact, when we worked at The Blaze, I did an interview with him about this very issue with Saeed Abedini at the time, when he was speaking out. So I think you're going to see him be a lot harsher, and I don't know what that looks like, but do whatever he has to do, I would assume, to try to make sure that the rest of these hostages come home.
I think strong rhetoric, it makes a difference if there's something there to back it up, and if you think that the person saying, whatever the rhetoric is actually going to follow through. It's like the parent who's like, well, I'm going to discipline you by doing X, Y, and Z if you don't follow my instruction, and then the parent that like well, I know that Dad's not actually going to follow through with this. So I don't really need to do what he says, or I can push the limits a little bit. And I think that we've seen some of that over the last 4 years with President Biden. Has been, I'm not, it's not that he won't follow through. It's just I'm not really convinced that he's going to follow through. So I think with Trump, there's a little bit more. One, he's been in office before, and two, he's definitely a much brasher, bolder type of guy generally. So I think there's more of a fear that Trump is making these threats, or he's using this strong rhetoric, and he actually means it. So I
Yeah.
think there's a difference we're seeing even before he's been inaugurated, because there is this promise of action if X, Y, and Z doesn't happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And also the fact that he's not beholden in any way, shape, or form to these Palestinian activists, right? These pro-Hamas apologists here in America. He does not care what they think, whereas a lot of the American left do, and they try to play this weird line of supporting Israel, but then also supporting Hamas or whatever they want to say they're doing. So we will continue to pray for all the hostages and the people that are unaccounted for and the families that are impacted by what happened on October 7th still to this day. So, all right, we are going to head over to the focus story now. And a burglar tried to break into a church in California over the holiday. Didn't end well for him here. What happened?
Yeah, so it's a pastor from a church in Antioch, California, which is part of the greater San Francisco Bay Area. The pastor is Nick Neves, First Family Church. So there was a burglar who came in the wee hours of Thanksgiving morning last Thursday, came to the church building, broke actually into a window of the church building with an axe, and then began to try to plunder through and steal various things. But before he could actually get to the act of stealing anything, the pastor spotted the guy. He said, "I shouted at him to stop and that the police were on their way, and he ran, and I grabbed a hold of him, and we ended up wrestling in the parking lot of the church." This is what Neves told NBC News last week of this entire incident. And as it turns out, the pastor is trained in mixed martial arts and jujitsu, and he said this was, something, an instance which doesn't come up very often, obviously, but he had an instance to actually put into practice these things that he's learned, really just for strength training and his own personal health. But he was able to put these things into practice and safely wrestle this guy to the ground.
What did the pastor have to say about the whole ordeal in general?
Yeah, so he said, "I like to stay fit, and I studied some jujitsu and kickboxing, and I have a mixed martial arts background, so that was very helpful, like I said, to be able to grapple with this gentleman without having to do much harm to him." And that actually was a big sticking point for the pastor. He said because he was aware of what he was doing, he said, "I was able really to restrain this guy and hold him pinned to the ground." He said he did actually get up a couple of times, and he would have to go and tackle him back down again. But he said because of his training, he was able to tackle him down and pin him to the ground and hold him there until eventually the guy just kind of tired of this back and forth of him getting up and running and then the pastor tackling him again. So he wore him out, and he said, the pastor said, "I knew that I could outlast him." And he was able to hold him down without really injuring him in any way. Obviously, it was not comfortable for the guy, but he didn't sustain any sort of real injury.
Yeah. How have the church members responded to this thing?
Yeah, so one of the church's longtime attenders, his name is Jeff. He said the whole ordeal, quote, "could have gone in a totally different direction, and we thank God that it didn't." He said that the pastor is, quote, "a very tough man," and that the church is grateful to have him as their pastor. And he even joked, he said, "I'm glad, given his training in mixed martial arts, I'm glad that this guy is our pastor and not our enemy, because that would be kind of concerning." So he obviously was saying that kind of tongue in cheek, but it's been interesting to see some of the reaction from locals there too, because this church is a really philanthropic church. I mean, even just before Thanksgiving, they actually provided groceries for about 130 different families in the area.
That's pretty cool. And I mean, listen, this is one of those things where we can kind of chuckle about the outcome and that he had this training, but it could have really, I mean, you never know, like somebody could have had a knife, somebody could have had a gun, somebody,
For sure.
and even in the other way, you've seen the story that right now he's on trial, but we can talk about this week on the podcast. It's a story that I've been keeping an eye on from afar here, but the former Marine who subdued a crazy person on a New York City subway, and the guy ends up dying from the hold, or, well, we don't really know exactly how he died yet, but they're trying to charge this guy with murder. And listen, I've been on a New York subway before. I know you guys have as well. And when you're doing that commute and you're there every day, you inevitably get stuck on one of those subways with an absolutely insane person. And I got to say, as someone who, I'm not exactly a trained fighter or anything. I mean, I could probably at least try something, but like, I don't know what I'm doing. It's terrifying being trapped in a subway or being trapped in a scenario with someone who's insane, maybe really big even, and a lot bigger than you, and you don't know what to do, and you don't want to agitate them further. Anyway, it could have gone a whole bunch of different ways. So glad that it worked out the way it did. But I think it does call an eye on, hey, we need to be ready for potentially situations like this.
One of the other things that the pastor said too, Billy, before you chime in, is he said it's pretty ironic, a kind of a sad irony, that the burglar attempted to break in and steal things from the church on Thanksgiving Day, obviously because it's Thanksgiving Day, but also because, like I said, just a few days prior, the church was giving away food and groceries to people who were in need. And he said if he had come a couple of days earlier, he would have been blessed and would have gotten some food and been taken care of. But he decided instead to smash windows and desecrate property and do something that's going to hurt our ministries. The pastor said that he hopes the incident serves as a wake-up call to the guy and that he'll repent and hopefully come to Christ because of it.
Yeah, one more thing, Billy. Again, I mean, I'm filibustering your time here, but I think that most churches, if they would just knock on the front door and ask for something, then most churches would probably give it if it wasn't like, I want all your money, something like that. Yeah, if you're really in need and you ask the church, you don't have to break in and steal stuff from the church. Usually they'll be happy to give it to you.
Yeah, I mean, that's the part of this that's so wild, is that the guy could have just gotten, and look, he could have gotten food and resources from the church. Obviously, in order for this to happen, something is off, right? Either in somebody's life or they're, I don't know. I'm not a doctor. I don't know the diagnosis here, but something is off. And so thankfully you had a pastor who knew how to take action. It makes me want to take up martial arts.
Yeah, it is. I've tried a couple sessions of jujitsu, and it's way harder of a work. First of all, it's really awkward when you're not used to wrestling around with people. It's awkward, but it's a lot harder than you think. Like you run out of energy really quickly. And so it's interesting. It's certainly worth a try if you haven't done it before, because you'll learn just some basic things and holds that you should do in a situation if somebody tries to attack you. I think it's a worthwhile thing to do. But appreciate you breaking that one down and bringing it to the podcast today, Trey. And on the main thing today, Billy, why don't you set this one up here for us a little bit? You talked to a leader from Crew about AIs. Tell me about what you guys are talking about in this conversation.
Yeah, this was Andre Echevarria. He is the head of U.S. digital strategies at Crew. And for those who don't know, Crew used to be known as Campus Crusade for Christ, major Christian ministry. And we spoke about this central question: is artificial intelligence ethical? And he really addresses that, but gets into really how Crew is using AI and how he believes Christians should use it. So that is today's main thing.
All right. Yeah, we'll check that out and we'll respond on the other side. And you can check out the whole conversation on the CBN News YouTube channel as well.
Well, I want to thank you for joining us today. The topic on the docket is artificial intelligence, and this is an area you've looked a lot at. I'm going to just start with the big, broad question that I know you hear a lot. Is artificial intelligence, AI, is it ethical?
It's a great question, right? I get that question all the time. Is it ethical? I would say that rather than debating that part, I would say, can we redeem it for the glory of God? And that's actually what we're doing here. We're using a lot of that technology to be able to actually help people discover a relationship with Jesus, go deeper in their relationship with Jesus, or maybe even share their current relationship with Jesus with their neighbors. So is it ethical? Depends how you use it, right?
Yeah, it's like every other technology, right? I mean, the internet, some of the most horrific things happen on the internet as a result of having the internet. And yet, how many people have you seen? I mean, you head up Crew's U.S. digital strategies, right? You're the leader of that. Cool. How many times have you seen the internet lead people to the Lord, I would imagine, over the years? Thousands upon thousands of times, right?
Right. Yeah, multiple times. There's actually a few stories, and even one that really directly ties into AI that if I could, I'd love to share with you.
Absolutely.
There's a quick text that I got. This actually was just last week. And what our friend says is, all of my life, I felt like an outcast. I'm reading you her text. It's more powerful in her words. I never grew up with a true role model in my life and was never raised religious. My story starts after 2020. I tried to make the best of it through COVID, but I felt like something is missing. Plus, on top of high school starting, I felt very isolated. However, at the end of my sophomore year, I decided to give Jesus a try. Christians were coming up on my For You page on social media, so I decided to research more about it. Eventually, I got listening to the Bible every day and eager to know more about God. I think that this is a really great point to illustrate how we're even using AI in these spaces. So let's say that our friend here has certain characteristics, like maybe they like certain brands and certain type of posts. So we're able to use AI to find more people like her and then be able to put our offers and messages of hope in front of them. So we're using the AI built into some of our advertising platforms to be able to find more people that we can actually share the gospel with. We're also using some of the people that are showing aptitudes, whether they're downloading things of our website or using our apps, being able to help them understand that we have an opportunity here for you to download resources that help you talk to your neighbor. And whether that resource is in a certain language, a certain context of sport, maybe our families or youth, we're able to actually provide that for you. So we're using AI in a lot of different spaces like this to come up, to help us be able to contextualize a lot of this.
Yeah, it's such a fascinating thing to consider. Let's say Christians say, we're not going to have anything to do with AI. It's going to be used for nefarious purposes. It's already being used for nefarious purposes. You think about countries like China, places where governments restrict people's rights, how AI is already being used and will continue to be used. If Christians don't rise up and say, hey, we're going to learn this and use it to bring light into the darkness, what happens? Let's say we don't do it at all. We abandon it. What do you think happens?
Yeah, exactly that. I mean, we just lose an opportunity. I think that that's the case, right? We should take every opportunity to share the hope, the eternal hope we have. And we just miss an opportunity. When I think about the term AI, a lot of people use the definition of artificial intelligence. One of the ways that we like to reframe it is to think about it as AI signifying an advanced intern. So if you think about it as an advanced intern, an intern, you obviously wouldn't let them run your radio show, Billy, right? You'd have them, but maybe do some research and maybe bring up some topics, ideas, and some things that you can then fine tune for the effort and the outcome that you want for the show. Well, we're doing the same thing. Right? We're using it to help us analyze documents, look at analytics, maybe even create or even translate in spaces that it would be really pertinent to have a different type of language or a different type of cultural context. And we're using to advance that. We've seen really great fruit from that. We're seeing a lot of people engage with the material, but I can't stress this enough. Guardrails are crucial. And we have guardrails built in throughout throughout all of our activities, because without the guardrails, you do kind of move into that scary space where it's kind of taking over.
Yeah. Or even an unethical space where you're allowing the AI to do everything to write. You can't go out there and publish a book that was written by AI, right? And say that you wrote it. I mean, I think that is not ethical. It may be legal. I don't know. There's some, debate about this, but it's not ethical. So when it comes to this, would you say, and I don't know if you can answer this yet, but that as a result of AI, you could actually say that you have seen definitively people come to Christ in your experience and more people coming to Christ as a result of using the technology?
Yeah, I would say that I don't have any examples of people coming to Christ, but I definitely have examples of people taking multiple steps in their spiritual journey. And what that does is that puts our field staff and those who the Lord has put in certain spaces to take advantage of that opportunity in the moment. I will say this, there's some helpful cautions that we really lay into here to make sure that we're always making sure that there's enough space for our people to do what they do, but always being guided by the Holy Spirit. And some of those cautions really include we never, like, we avoid fully automated core spiritual content. AI doesn't have a story. We have a story, and that story God continues to write. So we're just using AI again, as I defined, as an advanced intern, right?
Yeah.
We don't.
I love that.
Voices. Yeah.
I love that example. I love that example because I think that helps people understand the intern serves a role. It can be helpful, but it's not driving the work, right? It's not driving the story. When you look at how you're using AI now, and I know this is rapidly evolving and changing, when you look to the future, what place do you think it is going to have in the future of evangelism? Talk a little bit about maybe even different ways you would love to see it be used conceptually that it isn't now.
Yeah, that's a great question. I have three that we're driving towards. One of it is customization. When I think about how people that we're reaching need to hear the word or the stories, having that context, right? We speak very different to the folks that we're reaching to in Africa than the folks that we're reaching to in Peru, than the folks that we're reaching to in Boston, right? Their context, their livelihoods are completely different. So customization is definitely one that I see us taking great advantage of, and we're actually doing that in some spaces. Translation is the other one, whether it's translating books or resources, being able to have a resource and translate it into 60, 70, 80 languages on demand in minutes rather than months and years is a huge advantage for how we're accelerating the ministry. And then I think about creation. We are a large ministry, 16,000 staff, serving in over 190 countries. And some of the teams are really blessed. My team is a pretty large team. So we have a lot of resources, but we have a lot of people in the field that maybe it's only one or two of them. And being able to actually help them prototype faster is a great advantage to them. When they might not have a graphic designer or a copy editor, being able to have AI help with those tasks is really helpful.
All right. Fascinating conversation there for sure, because AI is certainly not going anywhere. It's only going to get more and more interesting and impressive. And we kind of laugh about like some of the pictures we've had to try to do, and it messes up the words and things like that. But this is all going to be remember this time period is going to be the us in 20 years going, remember when AI did this at the beginning? And it's just going to be even more and more part of our lives each and every day. So I think it's right for us to be talking about what do we do with this as Christians. So good conversation there. All right, that's going to leave us with time for one last thing on the podcast today.
We've got Psalm 31:1. In you, Lord, I have taken refuge. Let me never be put to shame. Deliver me in your righteousness. And it's just an amazing reminder that when things are crazy, when life is chaotic, we can find peace in God.
Yeah, for sure. To know that the Lord is our refuge before anything else is a good reminder. It's easy to run to other things instead of Him, but we ought to run to Him first.
Amen. All right, good spot to leave it on the podcast today. Make sure you're getting on over to cbnnews.com and faithwire.com for more news from a Christian perspective. Lord willing, and that creek don't rise up on us. We'll be back here tomorrow with more. God bless. We will see you then.